Hey everybody, it's Gina here from Gina Makes It. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I am creating this very simple one signature journal using a signature that is in an old book that I had already torn apart. So I know that you, like me, probably have a lot of these types of books in your stash, and you could never use the amount of book pages that you have. At least that's always how I feel. So I was thinking about my next journal, like a midsummer type journal, and I was thinking about how I could utilize these signatures, because when you tear them apart like I'm doing right here, they pretty much stay intact, and there's enough pages in them to kind of create one journal for, let's say, about a month period, which is what I was sort of looking for. So I thought, I wonder how this would hold up inside of a piece of paper that I create sort of a cover from. And lo and behold, it worked out really, really well. Now, you know that I like journals that are very neutral in nature and that are not decorated at all before I start using them. And so this was like the perfect scenario for somebody like me who does like sort of a blank neutral space when starting to work on a journal. So these are some printables that I'm calling hanky papers. These are vintage handkerchiefs from my own stash that I had scanned and edited and designed, and they are currently as digitals in my Etsy store. And I thought that they would make the perfect cover, one of them would, for a midsummer type journal. Now, I don't know if you saw the first journal. I already tried this method out on with one of them, and it worked really well. So I'm going to make another one, and I end up making a whole bunch with those covers, and they really worked out very nice. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just line the back side of this piece of paper with some coffee dyed paper. And of course, you can use whatever paper you have. This is printed on just a linen cotton blend, so it's a very thin piece of paper. It's not very thick at all. But once I add that coffee dyed piece of copy paper to the back of it, it gives it a little bit of stability. So my printer is not a borderless printing mechanism, and so I always have to cut off a little bit of a white border around the perimeter, and so that's just what I'm doing here. And then once I finish doing this, I actually fold the cover in half, and then I cut it in half. Now, it's probably an extra step, and you probably don't have to cut them in half, but I liked to see which way I liked the front and the back cover, and I really liked gluing the two pieces to the actual spine, but I'm getting ahead of myself and we'll get there. But that's what I do after I trim up these edges. I fold it in half and I cut the actual cover directly in half. So now I have these two covers, and I'm trying to decide, well, what do I want the front and what do I want the back, and which direction do I want them to go? So I decide to have the roses, the yellow roses, be the cover, and the other side to be the back cover, but I actually flip the back cover around so it looks kind of like one continuous piece of paper. Now I have all of these old vintage quilt edges, and the color greens, there's two different color greens that are used on them. That was very common to do this in the 1930s. It was a very popular color. It matched all of these covers so perfectly. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to use these as the actual spine. So you can see I'm just kind of ripping and cutting, and some of those edges are pieced. You can see it's hand quilted there in the middle, but I like that, and that I feel is kind of what's giving it a little bit of character. And so I'm kind of just roughing up the edges where I cut it instead of ripped it, and I'm trying to see where I want it to lay, and I really like it there. So what I end up doing is just gluing the outer edge, the inside edge of the cover and the inside edge of the back cover directly to the spine. And I'm leaving a tiny little gap because remember I have this tiny little signature. So I don't really need a big huge gap in order to make this journal work. Now I want to leave enough room for it to grow, as it will grow as I'm working in it, but you can see that it's just the perfect little piece to kind of complement this cover and back cover. So once I get this all glued down, I'm actually going to add a piece of lace to the inside. Now this is a vintage piece of lace that I have in my stash, and I'm going to say that I did make a bunch more of these after this video, and I found that I liked adding the lace after I did my sewing. So I'm going to do some sewing on the cover and the back cover just in a rectangle shape around the perimeter. And I did enjoy adding the lace after I did my sewing because the lace didn't get caught up in the sewing. So that's just something to think of. You can always just add your lace after you do your sewing. So right now I'm just trying to see how I like this signature laid out, and I really do. And so I'm just going to poke some holes through the middle of the signature. And actually I'm using since it was already sewn as a signature, I'm just using the holes that were there. And because this piece of fabric is so old, it kind of just slides right in. It's really, really easy to sew the signature in. So I'm just using the regular 3-stitch pamphlet stitch that I always use for sewing in my signatures. So I just come up on the top, I come up through the middle, and then I go down through the bottom, then I come back up on the outside through the middle, and then I just tie my signatures, one at the top and one at the bottom. I have a lot of videos on how I actually do this, and I actually have one in particular that I will link down below where I kind of slow it down and I talk you through the process, because this might be a little intimidating if you're new, but trust me, it is like one of the easiest things to do. It is not hard at all. So you can see I just kind of tie my signature, and at this point for this one, this was when I did the sewing around the perimeter on my covers, but like I mentioned before, I did the sewing first, then I glued the lace in, and then I sewed my signature in. So here it is sewn, and I really like the way it looks sewn, and it just works out so perfectly, and it's the perfect little journal. I'm actually really excited to start working in it. If you are working on a collage challenge or something, I feel like the book pages really give a good base to start working on. So you can see here are the different ones that I created, and I just love them. My little stack of signature journals. I would love to hear it if you made one of your own. And as always, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.